Hello, third graders. Today we're going to read a book called The Raft. It is written by Jim LaMarche, and he's also the illustrator. The narrator, or the person who tells this story in The Raft, is a boy named Nicky, who goes to spend the summer with his grandmother in the woods. Nicky's grandmother lives close to a river, and most of the story takes place near the river. I want you to close your eyes and imagine sitting by a river in the middle of summer. Think about what plants and animals you might see around you. Think about how the river is moving. Think about what sounds you hear. I hope you had fun visualizing the river. Let's get started reading the book, The Raft. By Jim LaMarche. There's nobody to play with, I complained. She doesn't even have a TV. Dad grinned. Well, she's not your normal kind of grandma, I guess, he said. Calls herself a river rat, he chuckled. But I promise she'll find plenty for you to do. And you know I can't take you with me this summer, Nicky. There'll be no kids there, and I'll be spending all my time at the plant. I felt the tears starting again, but I blinked hard and looked out the window. That afternoon, I stood in Grandma's yard and watched my dad drive away. Dust rose up behind our car as it disappeared into the pines. Well, we can't stand here all summer, said Grandma. Come on, Nicky, it's time for supper. Honey or maple syrup on your cornbread? Grandma asked. I don't like cornbread, I mumbled, poking my finger into the syrup pitcher when she wasn't looking. If you're going to do that, you better wash up first, she said. She had eyes in the back of her head. Bathroom's through there. I pushed the doorway curtain aside and walked into what would have been a living room in anyone else's house. Books were scattered everywhere, on the tables, on the chairs, even on the floor. 3 of the walls were cluttered with sketches and stuffed fish and charts of the river. Several fishing poles hung from the fourth with a tackle box, a snorkel, and a mask on the floor beneath them. It looked like a river rat's workroom, all right, except that in the middle of everything was a half-finished carving of a bear. Been carving that old fella for years, Grandma called from the kitchen. The real one hangs out at the dump. Now come get your supper before I feed it to him. Dad was right. Grandma found plenty for me to do. In the morning, I stacked firewood, then helped her clean out the rain gutters and change the spark plugs on her truck. The afternoon was almost over when she handed me a cane pole, a bobber, and some red worms. Fish fry tonight, she said, showing me how to bait the hook. That river's full of fat bluegills. Drop your line near the lily pads and you'll find 'em. Down at the dock, I looked things over. The lily pads were too close to shore. There couldn't be fish there. I walked to the end of the dock and threw my line out as far as I could. Then I sat down to wait, and wait, and wait. My bobber never moved. There's no fish in this stupid river, I said out loud, disgusted. We had hamburgers for supper. Can you infer whether he caught any fish or not? Give it another try, Grandma said the next evening. I bet you'll catch something. Don't count on it, I thought, as I headed back to the dock. I threw my line in the water. Then I stretched out on the dock to wait. I must have fallen asleep because I was awakened by a loud chirping and chattering. I sat up and looked around. A flock of birds was moving toward me along the river, hovering over something floating in the water. It drifted downstream, closer and closer, until finally it bumped up against the dock. Though it was covered with leaves and branches, now I could tell that it was a raft. What was it doing floating down the river all by itself, I wondered. I reached down and pushed some of the leaves aside. Beneath them was a drawing of a rabbit. It looked like those ancient cave paintings I'd seen in books, just outlines, but wild and fast and free. I cleaned away more leaves, and it was like finding presents under a Christmas tree. A bear, a fox, a raccoon, all with the wild look of the rabbit. Who had drawn them, I wondered? Where had the raft come from? I ran up to the cottage. Grandma was on the porch reading. "Do you have some rope I can use?" I asked. "In the shed, hun," she said. "Help yourself." She didn't ask me what I needed it for, and I decided not to tell her yet. I pushed the raft into the reeds along the river's edge, then tied it to the dock so it wouldn't drift away. All the while, birds flew over my head, every now and then swooping down to the raft as if it were a friend. A crane waded through the reeds to it. A turtle swam up from the bottom of the river. The moon had risen yellow over the river by the time I went up to the cottage to go to bed.